Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Pat and Mike Show. Today we have Angela on, who specializes in divorce financial planning. Now, I was having a conversation with her a couple weeks ago, and we started getting into what is all involved with that niche of when a divorce happens. And so I thought this was just great information that everyone needed to know. So, Angela, thank you so much for being on with us, and let's just get started by, having you give a little introduction of yourself. And before you do that, I just want to point out that there is a disclosure that has to roll on the bottom of the screen, which pretty much just says, I don't think we're giving any financial advice or anything here today, but we'll put her contact information up after that scrolls through. So welcome, Angela, and maybe take the floor and tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you're at.
Sure. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your segment. I really appreciate the time. And it's just simply just bringing awareness to maybe an area where there's a lot of questions. So my name is Angela Zangarola. I work for a New Path Financial. We have two offices, one in Ann Arbor, one in Macomb. We're a team of 3 advisors, myself, Nadine Burns, which is the CEO of a New Path Financial, and Deb Purcell. I am at the Macomb office. They are at the Ann Arbor office. Obviously, due to COVID, we are all doing a virtual meetings and appointments, as you well know. But we are an independent, comprehensive financial firm. We are holistic in nature, and what that means, not to sound cliche, is that we take all the areas of the financial picture, whether it be estate planning, such as what you all do, insurance and investment planning, tax. So we work alongside other professionals such as yourself in assisting the client and helping them to, achieve their goals and obviously answer their questions. But yeah, we are an independent firm. And again, so that just simply means we don't, work for a wirehouse or have to sell any proprietary products or anything like that. So, I've been in the financial services industry for over a decade. I started out actually training financial advisors, and then I moved into the role of a financial advisor. I was went through a life transition, a major life event, which would be divorce. And that catapulted me into becoming a financial advisor and serving clients in the area of divorce and financial planning.
What I loved when we started talking, and just your group in general, is that you each have a niche that you're all very passionate about. And just like in our world, we don't do divorces. We don't do real estate transactions. I mean, we kind of specialize in estate planning because there's so many little nuances that our area of practice brings us, that I'm sure you've experienced the same thing in your field, that a financial plan for someone going through a divorce has different nuances than just a traditional married couple or an individual.
Absolutely. The best way I can explain this is, and Pat and I had discussed this, is if you are, having, let's say, a knee problem, a continuous knee problem, you probably are going to go to your family doctor, but at some point you're probably going to go see an orthopedic, and so it's kind of similar in the sense where financial advisors, there's so many areas of, financial planning that come into play. As I mentioned, so many areas or, parts of that wheel or that are taken into consideration. And the same is true for divorce. It's almost as if we need to magnify that area and take a closer look. And we are trained in the area of what to ask, what to look for. And most importantly, I think, in the case of divorce financial planning is educating that client, because at the end of the day, my job is to educate them enough to empower them to make those decisions they're faced with, right? But like, as you mentioned, there are so many areas of divorce too, where other professionals come into play, whether it be the attorney, obviously, to get them through that divorce and have that finalized in the appropriate manner, to afterwards, possibly if they have minor children, going to see estate attorneys in the interim, whether or not they can maybe afford the house. We have a lot of questions that, clients do, prospects even come to us for in this specific area. So there are similarities, there are differences in those things. It's really taking that closer look, analyzing those components of divorce that oftentimes get it's just such a gray area. Folks are just paralyzed with fear. And I know myself, I went through that, and you can be truly the most, quick and maybe versed in your area of expertise, but you just don't know what you don't know until you know, unfortunately. And
Right.
anyone who's gone through divorce it's just, there's a myriad of emotions that anyone feels, and sometimes all in one day, and if this goes on, as everything is a slow process in the legal world. Oftentimes it's paralyzing, and a lot of noise, what your, maybe brother went through, or so-and-so's cousin went through.
Mm-hmm.
And even though, your situations may look almost identical or very similar, the outcomes can be completely black and white. So we just like to handhold that client, through the process.
Yeah, no, I think that there are a couple good points there. I didn't want to interrupt because it's all good, but there were a few kind of important things there. If we go back to, if we were paraphrasing the great Biggie Smalls there, if you don't know, now you know. But like those issues where people think, oh, this looks a lot like what happened with my brother, my cousin, my sister, something like that. But it's kind of like, if you're in a car, if you're driving your car and it's making god awful rattling noise, you're like, what is that? Maybe it's something minor. Maybe there's just a little dangly piece of metal and they can fix it out. Or maybe you're about to drop the transmission and you don't know what that is. I mean, that's not your particular area of expertise. You can either overreact or underreact to really significant things. I think that's why it's so important, especially when people are going through life changes, major life changes, that they talk to a specialist, because you miss out on those things if somebody's not there to say, hey, have you thought about this tiny nuance? Which, yeah, it doesn't affect anybody else, but in your particular place, and this was what we were talking about before. If you've got named beneficiaries, if you've got an estate plan, if you've got those things in place, how does that play out?
Absolutely, very, very important point, especially because we, and I say this over and over again, we're living in an era, in a time where the information out there is infinite. In any area and in any aspect of life, really. So if you wanted to learn about or educate yourself about this, that, or the other, it's just not enough to know. It's not enough to know. And it's our responsibility to know how, okay? And so oftentimes, as you all know, it takes a professional or somebody that is an expert in that area to help and assist you, on the how-to or the actionable steps to get you to that end outcome that, is advantageous or beneficial for you and your family. And so it's those things that I think it's the responsibility of all of us as professionals, as people seeking the information, as to not just to know, not just to be, inundated with information, but just to know how to. So that's where we come in as the professionals in your field and ours. And, we guide that client or that person along that process so that they are more informed. And let's be real, the biggest thing surrounding, I think, financials and divorce is fear, right? Mm-hmm. So we all know as humans, fear can often be debilitating and paralyzing. And it's almost like I want to say it's, and in my experience, in my personal experience, I can say, and I equate it to, let's say your house is on fire and I told you, okay, guys, you got 3 seconds to choose 3 things and you got a bolt, and those things for sure 100% will be saved. Okay. And, and then you save them and, okay, you can finally take a deep breath, and then you're watching your everything unfold in slow motion. It's like that bad car accident in slow motion. And I feel like that's what I was in. It's like there's a fog, you're not clear, there's uncertainty. And again, it's fear oftentimes is, as humans, probably one of your biggest enemies, because it doesn't allow you to see what's really going on, because emotions do take over. And an important part of our job is to, bring that client back. Let's look at the facts. Let's look at what we have. And oftentimes they don't even know what they have. And it's really important at that point to help them understand what it is they do have. And sometimes just found out that they had, maybe a pension. There was a pension that, I thought that was just the 401k or, something like that. And those things really come into play, because my job is not just to look at now, and it is to look at 5 and 10 and 20 years from now at the financial health or the financial picture. And just like with any financial planner, it doesn't even necessarily have to be divorce. When there is a life-changing event, it could be birth of a child, death of a spouse or a loved one. We have to recalibrate that financial plan, and look at the totality of what's going on and see if things have changed, so we can pivot, or steer that ship in that direction and make those adjustments along the way. So it's really important not only just to look at now, but at the end of the day, we're looking at, a couple years from now too.
I think a really important point to make, which you're aware of, which we're aware of, but a lot of people aren't, is to not assume or presume that things will work in a certain way. A lot of people, it's shocking how often this happens. We see it on the legal side. I'm sure you see it on the financial side, where they're like, oh, we got divorced. We went through this process. We had all this paperwork, this heartache, court orders, all of this was done. So now we're severed. It's like, if you don't call, Merrill Lynch or Raymond James and change the names on your 401k,
oh, yes.
It doesn't matter what happened in court. It doesn't matter if you're divorced. You rewrite your trust, you redo your will, you redo all of that planning. Unless you make those changes with the financial institutions, they do not care. This is in our world. The Kennedy decision is legendary because that was based in exactly that situation. Yeah. It was an acrimonious divorce. Guy redid all of his planning, but when he passed, the wife, the ex-wife, was still named on the 401k, went to the U.S. Supreme Court, 9-0 decision. She got it, and it happens both ways. So just to understand, hey, how could that possibly happen? It's very clear he didn't want that to go to his ex-wife, and the court said, hey, that's who you put on there. It's on you to change that. If you don't change it, that's how it's going to play out. I mean, and people will hear that and they're like, that's insane. It's like, insane or not, it's not my job to judge. It's not your job to judge. It's our job to say, hey, this is what will happen. Is that how you want this to play out?
Absolutely.
Because people will presume. They're like, well, that's silly. It's like, hey, silly stuff happens every day. And this is maybe not so silly when it winds up going there instead of to your kids, but just to say.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, again, it goes back to, maybe they didn't know, or maybe they failed to see, right? And so it's experts like you and professionals that help to.
And you.
What's that?
And you, experts
and myself, to help them not only understand that, hey, these are the, consequences, or these are the things that could happen if it's not titled properly, if this is worded even properly, even in a judgment. I will tell you, in divorce, I feel like I have to say this. It's almost like you have this one shot, at your settlement or your final judgment, and so it's really important to get it right. Get it right the first time. Make sure you're not missing anything. It's important to have maybe somebody look over that as a once over. And I'll tell you, I've seen it time and time again, the mistakes that have been made, and it's by no part of the attorney. The attorney is there at the end of the day to get you divorced. They're not looking at any maybe tax consequences that could be a result of dividing those assets, right? They may not be looking at if you have a settlement, for instance, and there is nothing to back that settlement in the event that now ex-spouse passes away and they owe you XYZ. Or maybe even backing up support payments, things of that nature. There are so many little things that we also help shed light on that maybe they were not even thinking about. And so it's really important to get it right because you got one shot. Like I said, yeah, you can go back. Of course, you can always go back to court, as you guys know, right? You can go back and reverse and appeal and file a motion for this, that, or the other. But at the end of the day, here's the bottom line on whose time and whose dime, right? And so if you're going to go back for an issue that may be, let's say, a $10,000 discrepancy or, something that it was overlooked. Well, how much is it going to cost you to get that rectified? So therein lies a lot of, the things that can be maybe, not avoided, but, looked at closer to say, okay, you know what, these are the things, okay, this is great. And sometimes it might even be, I've had this happen where it was mortgage. Oftentimes the marital home is the big, if not maybe sometimes in some cases, the largest asset. We see a lot of emotional ties to the marital home. My kids grew up here, they built the house together. And at the end of the day, we as professionals have to pull them out of that emotional, like I say, that cloud sometimes, because what if they can't afford the house? Or what if right now it looks like you can because you've got child support coming in, right? You've got spousal support coming in, supplemented by your income. And then once those kids maybe fall off the child support, in 2 years, and then the other one in 3 or maybe 4, then what? When we're looking at those cash flow projections, which are hugely important in making these decisions, at that point you're like, well, in 3 years you won't be able to afford the house. So it's almost as if we are like, okay, this is our come to Jesus meeting, for lack of a better cliche. We're gonna, and so as Pat and I think you and I mentioned this, there may be other ways or other solutions or creative options to get the client maybe to that end result. So it might not just be this black and white, yes or no, right? And it may be, well, what if? The what ifs. And that's what we come in. We do the what ifs. There's a lot of moving parts in divorce. And especially with, okay, we're going to come in and we're going to propose this, and you guys know how it works. And then the opposing side comes in and says no. And so it goes back and forth and back and forth. And so what we do is, when we're looking at the cash flow analysis and all of the assets in their totality, we're looking at ways to, maybe it's offsetting, one asset for another. But you really need to understand, is one really the equal, let's say, dollar value as the other, right?
Angela, can I interrupt you just for a second? And it is to reaffirm two things that you said, but I kept wanting to jump in, but it was all good information. Number one is the nuance. When you were talking about digging into those situations, the things that people do not think about, because they're like, oh, here's a cursory glance. And that might really cover 95% of it. Mm-hmm. But the devil is in the details. That's where it really matters. That's where you can really set things apart. And I mean, you've been through it yourself. I'm a child of divorce. I mean, they're very real things. And oftentimes people in those situations, they want to be past it. Like they don't want it to go on a second longer than it needs to. And unfortunately, that will put pressure on people to behave in a way that maybe isn't in their best interest. We can see it from the outside, but any attorney, Mike, back me up on this one, or any financial planner will tell you they are their own worst client, because when you are advocating for someone else, you can distance yourself emotionally. You can say, look, this is clearly what is right and good. And then you watch very smart, educated, experienced people fall all over themselves when it's their own situation, because you do have to trust that outside party who goes, hey, look, you are in this heart and soul. Like that is what's going on here. You need to hand that over to somebody who doesn't have that same weight, that same maybe influence, whatever you want to call it. Number one, to act separately. Like I think that's really important. And what you were saying about what are the little nuances, the things that you don't think about. And that was the very last point that you were making. What is the asset? Because if you've got $100,000 that are dollars in a bank, that's easy enough. That's a number. What is a home worth? What is an IRA or 401k worth when you have to pay the taxes on it in 20 years? What actually is that? Because people will look and they'll say, oh, it's $100,000 house. It's $100,000 in a 401k. That's not $100,000. That's 100 pre-tax, and that's 100, appraised value maybe. So to have somebody who really understands all of that nuance is really important, because it looks simple at first. Like, well, you'll take the house and I'll take the 401k, 100 each. That's not the same thing. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Angela, I got a question for you that I'm sure a lot of people are wondering. When does it make sense to sit down with you to talk through options and things to be thinking about? I mean, is this like when the writing's on the wall that the relationship might not work out? Like, give our listeners some insight of like best practices, because we usually, if someone comes to us looking for a referral to a divorce attorney, we just say the sooner the better, because knowledge helps make decisions moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Fantastic question, because I get that often. And so there's two parts to that. I do probably over 50% of my clients seek me prior to even retaining an attorney. So there's we work with clients in the pre, the during, and the post. What is the best time? I can say, really, truly, either pre or during. And what I mean by that is before you sign the papers. And then the reason for that, obviously, is what we just spoke about, is even if you're almost at that tail end, even if you've gone to mediation and maybe you're just getting ready to sign, it probably is prudent to have somebody look it over to make sure there aren't things that, are missing or maybe should be, included, etc. I will say this, a lot of folks, they're doing their research. They're they're information gathering when they seek me or when they find me. A lot of times it's easier and it's more advantageous that way if it's before they've retained counsel, because not only, number one, will we help them gather all of the information they need when they go into, to retain an attorney. There is discovery, financial discovery. They have to disclose everything. Oftentimes that is extremely overwhelming for folks that come in to see us. And so they just get so often, they don't even have passwords maybe to any of the logins, any of the retirement accounts, or maybe quite simply, they're not the ones with the retirement account. So they've never had access to it. Maybe they weren't the bill payers. And you know what, quite frankly, we do have those clients that I have, and they're awesome. They'll come in with the Excel spreadsheet, okay, literally of like, here's what we have, down to the account numbers. And those clients are awesome too, but it doesn't matter. There are always things that are missing in this whole puzzle. And so we help with those puzzle pieces, whether it's almost like if, you have a pie, the marital couple has a pie and it's already sliced here are the retirement assets, here, here's the, property assets, cash assets, etc. Liabilities, that's another big one. And now we've got to take this pie and divvy it up yet again. So we're going to reslice those slices, and then at the end, well, how are those? What does your pie look like? And so it's really important to note that it doesn't. The most advantageous time is really during or pre, filing for divorce. And like I said, for many reasons, it's not only time consuming to gather those documents, but the organization of it all is paramount in helping you make those decisions, helping us to analyze the data, helping us to get those numbers in order so that we can provide the attorney with the information to best support their case, or the client's case for that matter. So it's really important to note that either pre or during is probably the most advantageous time for a client to come in to see us.
And just to back that up, and I know we're about to wrap up here, but that's something that happens with us as well as with you. We do, when we're doing asset protection, when we're doing estate planning, we're talking about death, dementia, Alzheimer's, those things. You're talking about divorce. None of these are things that people want to talk about. It's human instinct to put your head in the sand and say, nope, never going to happen. Not me. That's not me. I will never die. I will never get divorced. I will certainly never get dementia. But that's going to happen. I mean, not to everyone except the death part. That'll come for all of us.
Sure.
But taxes, yeah, death and taxes. If we're going to quote the great Benjamin Franklin. But there's a reason you put on your seatbelt when you get in the car. It's probably not going to happen. You hope it doesn't. But if it does, you want to make sure that you've taken those basic steps to protect yourself. And a lot of people, we find this all the time. Folks will come to us. It's fortunate when they say, oh, we meant to do this years ago. Everything is still okay, but we now need to do it. It's a lot harder when people say, we should have done this years ago. We didn't do anything. Now there's dementia. Now there's death. Or in your case, now there's divorce. What happens now? So just to say, just because they are heavy, unpleasant topics that maybe we don't want to focus on, that doesn't mean they're not real and important and a place that you really do need to consider and take those steps. As hard as it can be to look that in the face. I mean, it's a reality.
Yeah. Angela, one last question. Can you represent, or do you represent both sides, or is this a situation where you're like, I need Angela on my team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do get that one often. So I represent predominantly, it's more or less one or the other. I have worked with both, husband and wife, where it's amicable. But that's, again, another area where, I've had, people come to me and they want to retain the same attorney, and, that's probably the number one mistake right there. I don't care how great you get along. It's just, probably encouraged that you have your own representation right at the end of the day. And there's other ways, and that's a whole nother part of it. There's different ways to get divorced. There's collaborative, there's, litigation, and things of that nature. And so what I will say is, more often than not, for me, the clients that come to me, it's one person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we get calls all the time and they say, oh yeah, we all get along and everything's fine. Right.
Yeah, and then when the rubber meets the road.
Really, at the end of the day, it is about being proactive, not reactive. Do we know what's going to happen tomorrow? No, with anything in life, really. But at the end of the day, it's our job to point those things out where maybe the client, in just even regular financial, holistic, comprehensive planning, to see those gaps where maybe there is risk. Long-term care, whatever it is, estate planning needs. And, we deal with these clients in divorce, whether it be pre, during, or after, let's say they're done with divorce and they come to me because now they have assets that were split by a quadro, or, the qualified domestic relations order, and they don't know what to do with it, or that, they really have no idea where to put it. We can come into play that way. But it's, clients just, when they come to us, they don't realize that there are so many other areas that we need to probably bring in other professionals, like the mortgage specialist or the real estate agent or the estate attorney, when looking at the whole picture. So it's very important to be the proactive. You can't guess for everything, right? Or plan for everything, but we can certainly plan for things that maybe will lessen the risk a bit, in certain areas.
Certainly. And I mean, people, if nothing else changes, literally nothing else changes, you've gone from filing jointly to filing singly. I mean, the tax consequences, if nothing else happens, you are now in a higher tax bracket, almost certainly, just because you're one person instead of two. I mean, there's all of that
Sure.
goes along with it. As simple as people can think things are, there are these little nuances, and that's why it really behooves them to speak to an expert who can say, have you thought about this? Have you asked these questions? Have you done those things? Mike and I are not divorce attorneys. We do asset protection. We do elder planning. And we do nothing with the financial side of it, other than say, hey, you should probably talk to this person who knows what's going on. So it's amazing that they have a resource like you. And Mike, if you want to play us off, I think we're good to go.
Yeah, Angela, thank you so much for being on the show with us. Great information, great continuation of the conversations that we've had. Obviously, her contact information has been scrolling, A New Path Financial. Get in touch with her, share this to anyone who you think might benefit in the information. So thank you, everyone, again, for tuning in. And Angela, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Mike and Pat. I really appreciate it. Appreciate your time. And I hope to, this could help even just one person, then I've done my job.
Beautiful.
All right.
Have a great day.
You too.